So thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. Today we're thinking about how we can help someone who's been newly diagnosed with MS. I'm Andrea Salmon. I'm one of the Education Program Coordinators and I'm the facilitator for today's webinar. And it's my pleasure to have Jane Bridgman online with me today as well. Jane is one of our MS nurse advisors. We start all our programs by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians, past, present and emerging, on whose lands we meet today, no matter where we're joining in from. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country, and we respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. It is my pleasure to have Jane Bridgman online today. Jane is a registered nurse with over 6 years experience in disability and aged care, in progressive neurological conditions and primary health care. Jane is also an internationally certified MS nurse, and Jane works with us here at MS as one of our MS nurse advisors. The nurse advisors are available for phone consultations about anything concerning you in regard to your MS. Jane and Bridie are our two nurse advisors, and they, I know, spend a lot of time on the phone talking to people. So it's great to have you with us today, Jane.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me today. And as Andrea said, we're going to do a bit of a brief overview of a few things here, but please do know that much more in-depth information is available. So all you have to do is reach out. We're going to have a look at the experience of being diagnosed with MS, some of the myths that might surround MS, what to expect, a little bit about the disease MS and how it's managed, what your role is or could be in all of this, and where to get further support and information for yourself. So perhaps next slide, Andrea. So the experience of being diagnosed with MS is different for everybody. For some people, this diagnosis can happen quite quickly and so be quite a shock and quite abrupt. And for other people, it can be quite a long, drawn out process. It can take months or even years, if you would believe. And for those people, it can be very difficult because they may have symptoms that have been misdiagnosed over years or even ignored, or they may have been told by many doctors that, you know, you're making this up, there's nothing wrong with you. So that can be quite traumatic in itself as well. There also can be many tests involved, and so that can be quite exhausting and quite onerous and even traumatic as well, especially if people need some of those more invasive tests. There's also different reactions to the diagnosis. So for a lot of people, it's a surprise, but for some people, it's also a relief. And especially for those people that have known that there's something not quite right within their body for some time, it can actually be a relief and a bit of validation to say, there is something going on in your body. We know what it is now, and everything you've been saying makes sense. You haven't been making things up. So for some people, they do feel like that, but it's certainly not everybody. There's also a range of emotions that can come with this. It could be anger, it could be shock, it could be grief, it could be fear. Fear of the unknown is a big one and inevitable in anything to do with life, especially this. And these are different for everybody, and there can be fluctuations. So it's normal that someone might start by feeling shocked, and then they may feel empowered, and then they might go to grief and kind of move around a bit. So that's all normal, and it can take quite a while for things to settle down in terms of how somebody may feel. It's also very common for the diagnosis of MS to happen at a time when the person is actually having quite a lot of symptoms as well. So in that really newly diagnosed phase, it's not just mentally processing all of that information. They also may have a number of symptoms they have to deal with. So they may also be feeling unwell, be having difficulty with some things in their daily life. And a lot of the MS symptoms we say are invisible, as in you can't see them by looking at somebody. So that makes it even harder. Because if you can imagine, if you see somebody, I don't know, at the supermarket with crutches and their leg in a moon boot, you can see that perhaps their leg is injured, that they might be a bit slower. You might let them go in front of you in the line at the supermarket. So it's a visual cue to know that that person may be injured. But with these invisible symptoms, you can't see anything like that. So it's really hard sometimes to communicate those with other people. And some of these symptoms may also be new. So that can also be quite frightening. Let's look at some of the myths. So some of the myths that we have are things that you may have heard, people may think, or it may be that they were accurate a long, long time ago, but things have changed. A lot of people say, oh, I knew someone with MS a long time ago, or I did the MS readathon at school, but I don't know much else. So some people might think, well, everybody with MS ends up in a wheelchair. That's not true. So that's a myth. Some people may do so, and people with MS can have difficulty with walking, but that's not the case for everybody. We've had lots of advances in medication and the overall medical care, so that is no longer true. It may be another myth to say people with MS can't work. Again, that's not true. So lots of people with MS are working full-time, part-time, studying, doing lots of different things. So that's also a myth. You may also think, well, people with MS probably can't have kids, right? Again, untrue. There's lots of people that are diagnosed with MS are actually young women, and they're also the types of people that have babies. So lots of people are diagnosed and then go on to have healthy, happy babies and do quite a good job in raising them. We've had some clients that are diagnosed whilst they're pregnant. Obviously, that's quite a tough thing to go through at the same time, but very doable, and people that have also been diagnosed after they've had 1 or 2 babies and will go on to have more as well. There's also some myths about diet. You may think perhaps there's one specific diet that everybody with MS should follow quite strictly, and if they don't, it's going to cause big problems with their MS. That's not quite the case. So a healthy diet is very beneficial and important, but there's not one diet that we think is better than others, and there's not strong evidence to say that following a really strict diet will have a massive impact on how things go. It could also be said a common myth is that, well, we can't make any future plans. And I understand at the moment with COVID, none of us can make plans. But if we pretend that's not happening, you may be thinking, well, we can't go away to the beach house this year for Christmas, or he was going to enroll in a diploma next year, but we won't be able to do that because we don't know what MS will do. It is possible to make these future plans and continue on with life kind of as you had hoped, but sometimes we might need to make adjustments depending on how the MS works out. It also is very common that people will think all MS is the same, and that is a really interesting thing to consider. It is different for everyone. So MS can appear differently in people, they can have different symptoms, and how it progresses over time is also very different. So it's very unhelpful to compare people together. It's normal to think, oh, well, you know, if my wife has been diagnosed with MS, I'm sure that'll end up like my cousin who had MS. That's not the case. So it's really important not to compare. Some people might have quite a mild version of MS. For some people, it might be more active. People can be diagnosed at different ages, have different symptoms. It's really quite broad. And you also might have some thoughts about death. You could think, well, if someone's diagnosed with MS, that means they will die soon. Again, that's a myth. That's not true at all. So these are really important just at the start to think about so that we kind of know where we're heading. Let's have a look at what to expect. With this slide, we purposely chose this image because I think it shows that for many people that are diagnosed with MS, they'll have a lot of people around them that all might have different ideas. And so it can be a lot. So it's good just to have a general notion of what's going on, and it might ease up on some of the questions that you might have to ask. So people with MS do require some medical care, usually under the care of a neurologist, and that's ongoing care. So that will happen kind of indefinitely, and it's usually 6 or 12 monthly appointments. It could be in the public healthcare system or under a private neurologist. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes to get quick responses from a neurologist or call anytime, day or night, with questions. So it's common to have lots of questions that you want to ask, but sometimes a person with MS might have to wait till their next appointment or might have to ask a question, but wait to hear back a little bit as well. It's also good to know that people will have different approaches in how they want to manage their MS. So there are different reactions, as we said, and it's good to be mindful and supportive of that. So some people might be incredibly empowered and want to make changes right away and feel quite positive. And for other people, they may feel the opposite. And it's good to be mindful of their approach and perhaps not force a different one on them. There are also some less than helpful reactions. So even if you may be feeling like it's all too much and really not coping, it might not be helpful to put this on the person that has MS kind of right in that moment. It might be good just to sit with it and see how you feel and do communicate openly, but be mindful of sharing worst case scenarios or kind of morbid questions. I do speak to people that are newly diagnosed quite often, and it's kind of extra stress that they have to deal with it. They'll tell somebody they have MS, and the first thing they'll hear back is, "Oh, my auntie had MS, she died." So those things are just not helpful to hear, and as we discussed, often are not true as well. It's also good to know that there's lots of questions, but the person with MS probably doesn't have any more answers than they've already given you. So it's really natural to say, "What happens here? How does this happen? When does that happen? What are they going to do about this?" The person with MS probably doesn't have any answers either, and they are probably full of questions, even more than you have. So be mindful about maybe how many you're asking them, because it's exhausting sometimes. So let's have a look at what is MS. So if we look at what MS is, multiple sclerosis just means multiple scars. And these scars that we're talking about happen inside the central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and also the optic nerves, which joins the eyes to the brain. And so you can see on this picture here, there's a nerve, and kind of down the middle of the nerve, there's what we call a myelin sheath. And the myelin is like the insulation of a nerve. And I kind of picture it like the rubber coating that you get on an electrical kind of cord. And so it insulates the nerve and keeps it safe and allows messages to travel quickly down that nerve. So in MS, for some reason, the person's own immune system attacks that insulation. So those kind of white blood cells that we have that are supposed to keep us safe and attack foreign germs and things in our body, they for some reason get into the brain or the spinal cord area, and they see that insulation and they think, "That's something foreign, let's attack that." And when they do, it kind of chips away at that little insulation, kind of like if a mouse was to chew on an electrical cord, and that nerve is then exposed. So then the messages don't travel as clearly, and in that little area where that happens, it leaves a scar. And so we call that a lesion. And when we do an MRI, those show up as kind of like little spots. So multiple scars, multiple sclerosis, that's what that means. So symptoms can happen anywhere in the body, but it really relates to the brain and the spinal cord. So let's have a look at what some of the symptoms can be. There are many symptoms of MS, but not everybody will experience all of them or even to the same degree. And many of the symptoms are also invisible. So you'll see here things like changes to vision or sensory changes. That means kind of sensations. So someone might feel pins and needles or numbness or tingling or buzzing. People can have pain. They could have changes to their speech or swallowing, and fatigue is a big one. So you might not know that people with MS can be very tired, extremely tired. Not always, and not for everybody, and certainly not always at the start, but it can be a really difficult symptom to manage. And certainly it's hard to manage sometimes around other people, because other people might say, "Oh, well, what do you mean you get tired? I get tired too." But I kind of liken that to saying to a woman in labour, "What do you mean? We've all had tummy aches. You know, that's fine, get over it." it's a different kind of tiredness. So that's a really big one to be mindful of. And another quite interesting symptom of MS is heat intolerance. So for a lot of people, if their body becomes warm, their core temperature, if that raises a little bit, perhaps it's a really warm day or they've just had a really hot shower, it can make some of their symptoms worse or make them a bit more tired. So that's a good thing to note. It's probably not warm for any of you where you are at the moment. It's not for me, but in summer, that's a good one to notice as well. Let's have a look at the treatment of MS. So we kind of have a few different options. The main treatment that we use is a long-term style treatment. We call it disease modifying therapy. So it's not a cure because we don't have a cure for MS, but it's used in a preventative way. And it's going to slow down the progression of MS over time, or if it really works out well, it may stop how the MS progresses. There's no way of knowing how well it will work, and it can also be hard to know how well it's working. I kind of liken it to sunscreen. You don't really know how well sunscreen's working for you or what it's doing, other than the fact that perhaps you didn't get a sunburnt as you thought you were going to. So it's a preventative style of medication. Often this medication can be immunosuppressive to some extent because, as we touched on earlier, it's actually the immune system that causes the problem. So normally we want people to have a really strong immune system, but in the sense of someone with MS, their immune system is overactive. So we need to bring it down a notch, and that's how we prevent further lesions from developing. There are quite a few options of what treatment someone might go on. There's about 12 or more, and the right treatment for each person is different. So this can take a while to work out as well. So somebody diagnosed with MS on Monday isn't necessarily going to start treatment on Tuesday. There can be tests involved. They might have to go home and think about what they would like to choose. So that can be quite a tough time. And that doesn't treat any of the symptoms. So even if someone starts on this treatment, it won't necessarily change how they feel day to day. So when we talk about symptom management, that is when we treat the individual symptoms. So if somebody experiences pain, how do we treat that pain? If someone experiences fatigue, what do we do about that? So there can be quite a few layers to what we do in managing the MS overall. With some of those disease modifying therapies, the long-term treatments, some of them are tablets that people take at home. There might be injections that someone has to give themselves, or there are some infusions as well. So people will have to go into hospital just for the day, have that treatment and come home again. So in terms of what you could do, it might be good just to be aware of that. If someone has medication, the same as any medication, that's always something we need to be careful about leaving in the car. It's a good thing to remember that you probably shouldn't leave medication in the car in the sun. So if you're going to pick up someone's prescription medication, it's not a good thing to leave it in the boot for 6 hours on a warm day, or perhaps be mindful if you're going away on a trip somewhere that it needs to go along with you. And people with infusions, they may need a lift to the hospital, or perhaps be appreciative of a nice dinner to come home to afterwards. So they're just some things to be mindful of there. And let's have a look at your role a little bit more, because there's a few things that are quite helpful. Listening is a big one. It's really, really important. As I said, people can have lots of different reactions and lots of different things that they are feeling, and it can be really nice for them to have somewhere and someone to go to just to talk. And often people are worried about judgment of what they may feel, and it's not always rational things that people are afraid of or want to talk about as well. So that can sometimes make people feel even more embarrassed about what they want to talk about. It's also good to have some understanding. So there is a lot to learn about MS. So perhaps listen to what you're being told and think about, well, is it important I learn a bit more about that? And kind of follow up later, as opposed to saying, I don't know what that means. Explain that to me. You tell me. That can be good to do, but also remember that for the person with MS, they may have 5, 10, 15 people saying, can you explain that to me in one day? So it's a lot. It's sometimes helpful if you take some time to learn a little bit about what's important in your own time. Communication is so important, and two-way communication is very, very important. I've had a number of times where I've spoken to perhaps a gentleman who's newly diagnosed with MS, and he's told me, oh, I've got a new symptom, but I don't want to tell my wife. I know she's worried, so I'm trying my best just to manage it myself. And then in the same day, I've had the wife call up and say, I'm worried he's not telling me everything. I just wish he'd tell me. I'm so worried because I know that he's not communicating with me. So it's really important to have that open communication and kind of share any worries or concerns. But as I said, just be mindful that we're perhaps not triggering more distress for people. We've got here to be informed, but not in charge, and that's really important. It's helpful to know what is around, but try not to be too pushy. Be helpful when you're asked to be helpful, and let people be as independent as possible, and maybe don't be forceful. We all may have different ways we would go about this because we all kind of approach different things in life a little bit differently. And it can be really tough if someone you love is going about something in a totally different way than you would. I've spoken to a few people when they call up and they'll say, but my daughter, she's diagnosed with MS and she's not doing X, Y, and Z. And will you tell her to do that? And that's really tough because there's no right or wrong way to go about this. So just be mindful of that too. And then some do's and don'ts. Instead of perhaps continuously asking someone how their MS is going, which is normal that you think about it all the time, but perhaps ask more broad questions such as, how are things today? Because it gives the person a chance to talk about their MS, but it may not be their MS that's bothering them the most at that moment. So it's okay to ask them about other things in their life, or just let them have that space to tell you what they want to tell you when they want to tell you. Because it's a lot, again, if you're getting messages and calls all day with people going, how are you going? How's your MS? What's happening? It's really good just to lay off it a little bit and let them come to you when they want to. If you think that someone might need help with something, uh, perhaps ask them if they want to do it together instead of just taking over for them, because sometimes that's a little bit nicer. And if there are some simple or nice gestures that aren't too offensive or over the top, perhaps take initiative and just do something nice. And I say that because often when you go through a tough time, lots of people will say, let me know if you need anything, I'm here if you need. And it's great, but it can be really hard to write back to that and say, this is what I need. A client recently said to me that, said to us, when she was newly diagnosed, she also had a rental inspection. And one of her friends, without even being asked, just showed up at the front door with a vacuum and some cleaning supplies and just said, sit down, I'm going to clean your house for you. So simple things like that, or dropping off coffees, or just something nice can be lovely. And it's nice sometimes not to have to implicitly ask. But as I said, just be mindful that perhaps that's not the right choice for everybody, and not to go over the top as well. I've also written here to be normal. And I mean in that in the sense of the relationship. So if you've not had a relationship with someone where they would always share their personal health details, probably not going to do it now either. And if you're someone who has a lot of jovial communication and a lot of humor with this person, keep that going. We have different friendships for different things. And so continue being their friend or their partner or their family member as you always have. It's really important. Some people with MS worry that their relationships with people may change once they find out. They worry they might be treated differently. So just be mindful of that. And again, I know with COVID, we're probably not doing anything, but keep inviting people to things, even if you think that person may not be able to attend because you know they're not having a good time. It's lovely to say, hey, we're doing this on the weekend. You know, if you want to come, you can come, but that's okay if you don't, but we're thinking of you. So that's really nice not to be forgotten. And another thing that you could do is learn a bit about MS, but be mindful that, as I said, it's different for everyone. So if you come across conflicting information than what the person's told you they are doing, just be mindful it's probably for a reason, and they'll be getting expert advice that suits them from their medical team. Some of the don'ts: catastrophizing or kind of worst case scenario. So that's normal to think about, but be mindful of putting that on someone else. So kind of, oh, well, if you've got your health insurance organized, what about life insurance? When do you get a wheelchair? Your house has got steps at the front. What are you doing about that? Those kinds of things aren't helpful, probably aren't relevant, not necessary potentially at all. So just be mindful of that. Also, it's normal to want to take action and do things for someone, but don't do anything without their consent. It's good to know what's available, but just be mindful of signing people up for programs or things if that's not what they're ready for. Also, be mindful about disclosing their diagnosis. Depending on the situation, it may be okay for you to disclose that to other people, but unless you've been told it's okay to share it with people, potentially don't, or check perhaps, because it is a big deal, and for some people they may not disclose to their broader circle of people for a long time. Other people will tell everybody right away. So just be mindful that can be a bit of a thing, and don't take it too personally if someone can't maybe attend a party or a function or other things, because as we said, there's lots of symptoms. So even if someone looks okay, just be mindful that they might not feel as good as they may look. So it's not personal perhaps if someone's not able to attend. And because we said that some of the treatments can be immunosuppressive, it's really good to be mindful of not passing on any nasty germs. So if you've got a gastro or the flu or something, just be mindful that you're not passing those on. You don't have to be over the top and tell them they can't come to Christmas lunch because someone's got an infected, wound on their elbow. It's not that serious, but just be mindful that, if you wouldn't go to work with that kind of sickness, then perhaps don't go over to their house for lunch. But again, I appreciate at the moment we're not doing any of those things, but just be mindful of them. Now let's look at some further support and information for you, because that's really important. As we said, learning about MS is quite an important part of all of this because it's not a common condition, so not a lot of people know about it, and for many people, the few things that we know might not be accurate. So there's some more reputable sources of information than others. Our website is a really good one, and there's also a UK-based website called the MS Trust, and that's quite a good website as well to have a look at. It's really important that you stay well and look after yourselves. Depending on who you are and the relationship to the person with MS, you may be feeling okay about things, or you might be having a really tough time as well. And that's okay. So make sure that you're keeping up with your social connections, things that make you feel good that aren't really bad for you, whether it's calling friends or different activities or taking some time out for yourself just to process. It's really important that you look after yourself as well. And as I said, it's okay. If it's a lot for you at the moment, that's all right. So do continue to monitor how you're going. Nutrition is very important. Simple things like if you're noticing ongoing trouble with getting to sleep because you're worried at night, or perhaps eating lots of food that doesn't make you feel that good, just be mindful of those things and see what little changes you can make that make you feel a little bit better. And there is specific emotional support available. So counselling is really helpful because it provides a confidential space for you to work through your worries and your thoughts and your troubles. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's really important if you are struggling to get some help. There's also services like Beyond Blue. And the wonderful thing about services like Beyond Blue and Lifeline is that they are 24-hour services. So if you wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning, perhaps, and you're really struggling and you don't know who to go to, give them a call. And you're very much welcome to call us at MS Connect. No matter what you're worried about, there's always help available for things. So no question is too small. There's no such thing as a silly question. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need anything. Andrea, I think I might pass back over to you for the next slide. Is that right?
That's fine, Jane. Yes, I can take people through these last few slides, and just with a reminder that if you're not familiar with our webinar system, you can ask a question through the question panel, which you find in the control panel, which is generally on the top right-hand side of your screen. So look for a little orange box with a white arrow, open that up, and then look for a heading that says questions with a white triangle beside it. Click on the little triangle, that will open up a dialog box. But that's been great, Jane, and I'll just reinforce what Jane was just saying. There are a number of ways that you can reach out and get support and connection, and MS Connect is certainly one of those. The team at MS Connect are there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you have to leave a message, please leave a message, because they will always get back to you. Even if you want to tell them your preferred time for a call back, that can be arranged. And also the value of peer support, speaking to other people who are also sharing the journey. So this applies to people who have been diagnosed with MS, but it also applies to family members, friends, carers, the whole gamut of connections to the person who's been diagnosed. That support can be one-on-one phone support with a trained peer. It can also be a group. So most of our face-to-face groups are meeting by telephone at the moment, although not in every state. And then we also have specific tele groups, and there's also Facebook groups as well. Just places where you can ask your question of someone else who's living a similar experience, get their advice, get their experience of how they handled it, and share that. It's a fabulous opportunity. On the screen there, you can see our 3 peer support coordinators, Kat, Kim and Ange. So any questions that you might have, you can certainly put in the question area. We always commit to following them up. So if we don't answer it right now, we'll follow that up with you afterwards. And again, it doesn't have to be today. So if you go away from this session and as you're thinking about things, you think, oh, I should have asked, just send an email or give a call to MS Connect. So I'll just have a look over here. There's a question in regard to counselling services for carers. We probably need to know what state you're in, but possibly we could follow that up afterwards with an email if you're in, depending on where you live. There are a variety of services specifically for family members. So there are Carers Vic, Carers New South Wales, Carers Tas, Carers ACT in all the different states as an organisation. And then there are some others like in Victoria, we also have BrainLink, which is a great support service depending where you live. So we can let you know. In New South Wales, I would say look up Carers New South Wales to see what services they're offering. But as I said too, we have some support for carers as well.
And separate to the carer specific support, through Medicare, there are the standard kind of options. So as a good start, you could have a chat with your GP. I hope you have one that you're comfortable with, but even if you don't, any GP can help you with a referral into a psychologist. And under a mental health care plan, you can get access to 10 subsidised psychology sessions per year. And at the moment, I believe with COVID, that may even be extended to a higher amount. And there's certainly lots of telehealth available as well at the moment. So if you are in an area where it's not that easy for you to get in the car and drive somewhere, then lots of psychologists are doing phone-based options as well. So that can be a really good way. And you don't have to access all kind of 10 sessions. It might just be 1 or 2, but you can do that, and everyone's able to do that.
It's possibly also worth mentioning that a lot of workplaces have an employee assistance program, and that program is not contained to just issues related to work. So have a think about that too. They can be a great another option for just that listening ear.
Absolutely.
So we're not being overwhelmed with questions. I'm going to suggest that's probably because some of the material needs to just be digested. And Jane, it was a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. I will just encourage people to please stay online when the webinar finishes to just answer a few questions, give us some feedback. This is actually a new program, so we're interested to get your feedback on how you felt the information was presented, and particularly if you think there was something we've missed out on. This particular program was designed for supporting people who are recently diagnosed. Next month, you'll see another program that is designed for when you're supporting someone who has been living with MS for longer. So keep an eye out for that one as well. That might be relevant to your situation. So thank you everyone for being online. The program was recorded and will be available on the website within a week. So if you felt as you were listening there was someone else who you thought you would like to hear this information, don't forget that you can refer them to the website and the webinar library to catch up on the information at another time. Thank you everyone for being online, and thank you again, Jane, for your time today. That's been wonderful.